Hi, Sherri Colvin from Mini Doll Kits. One of the most common questions I'm asked is, how do I paint the kit? More specifically, how do I paint the kit face? So in this video, I wanted to show you how I do it. We'll start with an all-over flesh wash and we'll go through the process until we end up with sealing the kit to protect your work. So let's go on over to the work table and start painting a kit. So here we are at the work table, and I always like to start by washing down my resin kit with some 91% isopropyl alcohol. I use a glass for mixing my paint on, 2 cups of water, and mix a flesh color either out of acrylic paint or usually out of acrylic inks. I use a 1/4 inch oval mop brush and assorted blush colored pan pastels. There's a link in the description below that will give you all the products used in this video. I also have a collection of brushes used specifically for the pastels. Readers or a magnifier are going to be very helpful when working with such small detail. Let's continue on now to the all-over flesh wash process. You can use pre-mixed craft acrylic paints if you'd like, or you can mix your own acrylic ink. One thing to remember if you use the craft acrylic paints is that they need to be thinned down to about a milk consistency. The nice thing about the acrylic inks is they are already thin enough to apply right out of the bottle. Now you'll notice that when I coat the figure, I'm using the thinnest wash that I can. There only needs to be enough paint to provide some tooth for the blushing and the subsequent layers of paint to adhere to. There's a link to the acrylic ink flesh recipe in the description below. One of the most important things to remember about blushing the face is, just like the all-over flesh wash, less is more. And that's why we use a paper towel. When you dip your paintbrush into the blush, you're going to want to get rid of most of the blush that you just loaded onto it. Sounds crazy, I know, but it's much better than getting too much of the blush onto the face. Now, I like to start by applying the darker colors of my blush to the figure, and I'll do that at the ears, the pit of the neck, the cheekbones, the eyes, and sometimes even up under the lips like this. Up under the chin creates a nice shadow line. And then when I'm done with that, I'll just give it an all-over brushing with a neutral color. In areas where the skin is the thinnest, blue is the color to use as a blush. So that would be places like the temples and underneath the eyes. Use it sparingly, as blue is a very strong color. Painting the whites of the eyes is all about having a paint that's thin enough to flow into the eye area, and also having a brush that's small enough to apply that paint into the eye area. The brush I'm using here is an 18-0 short liner, and even though it's very small, I've actually taken some of the hairs out to make it even thinner. When the paint is thin enough, you can load it on your brush and get it to the eye area, and it should just flow into that area. You can direct it with your brush, but let the paint do the work. It's also helpful on the second eye to turn the figure upside down. It just gets your hands out of the way while you're painting it. The iris and the pupil are probably the most challenging part of painting any miniature figure. Here I'm using the same brush I used to paint the whites of the eyes, and I'm making a circle and filling it in with black ink. This makes the dark outer rim of the iris. Now, it's best not to try to center the iris in the eye, but instead to have it go a little bit to the outside of the face. In other words, a little more towards the cheekbones. Once you've mixed up the color for your iris, it's just a matter of dropping that color onto the black circle that you just made, leaving a very small rim of the black color visible. After the color of the iris has dried, you can put a dot of black ink in the middle of the iris color. This forms the pupil. I've also used a very, very fine tip pen to make a black dot in the middle of the iris. Another way to put a little bit of life in the eyes is to take a dot of white paint or ink and put it just to one side of each pupil. This mimics the reflection of light really well. I like to define the lips and the eyes and the nostrils with a little bit of black ink. This is really, really thin black ink that I'm putting on with that 18-0 short liner. What this will do is make the expression clearer and a lot more realistic. It can emphasize the turn of a mouth or the glance of an eye. Use that same black wash to fill in the nostrils. It's often overlooked, but the shape of a nostril is really important to an expression. Lips can vary so much depending on whether it's a male figure or a female figure or what kind of character you're painting. In this segment, I want to show you how I paint the male lip, and I just do it by adding the thinnest wash of a red color, again with the 18-0 short liner. Okay, so here comes the fun part, crevices and wrinkles. And the way that I like to do this is to mix some processed magenta or a red color and a little bit of black together to make a very, very thin wash. And I apply it wherever I want to emphasize the wrinkles or the dimples or the holes in the ears, the chin. It actually comes out looking like a purple color and is super effective in making a shadow. And yes, you do see me using my fingernail as a tiny easel. Now onto the eyebrows, and of course there are many different colors you can make an eyebrow, but for this video I'm going to be using a brown color and a very small amount of a cool gray color, making sure that those colors are quite thin. So with my 18-0 short liner, I begin to apply the brown color very, very sparingly, kind of following the outline of the sculpted eyebrow. There we go with the fingernail again. So this is the cool gray color, and I'm just putting it on top of the brown color. Mixing a few different colors together to make an eyebrow tends to give it dimension and interest. It's a neat trick to take the brow color into the hairline. It pulls those two elements together. It's important to remember that you can work back and forth on the face. If you're working on one element such as the brow or the lips, you can still go back and touch up other areas. Before sealing all of your work, it can be helpful to coat the scalp with the hair color. It serves as a base color if your viscous wigging should not cover the entire hair area. And we're ready to seal all of that hard work. I like to use a matte acrylic spray sealer. Experiment with different types and find what you like, but this UV resistant Krylon I find is very effective and non-yellowing. As always, follow the instructions on the can. I hope you liked this video and found it informative. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next mini doll kits tutorial. Bye bye.